My husband's new mistress, wrapped in a towel, opened the door to the home I designed and said, "My house now. Get out." I am writing this with hands that are shaking so violently I can barely hold my phone. My name is Emily. I am 38 years old, and until this morning, I thought I was a respected architect and a good mother. But in the span of 5 minutes, standing on the porch of the house I built brick by brick, my entire existence was erased. Mark, the man I loved for 12 years, hid in the bathroom like a coward while a 24-year-old stranger named Jessica stood there, dripping wet on my hardwood floors. Wearing my monogrammed bath towel, she did not just take my husband. She is currently inside redecorating my children's bedrooms, throwing away my family photos, and calling herself their new mommy on social media. They are painting me as the unstable, alcoholic villain to the court. They are gaslighting me until I question my own sanity. How does a woman go from being the queen of her castle to a trespasser in her own life in a single heartbeat? I feel like my chest is being crushed. I have a plan to get my children back, but it is dangerous. It might destroy us all. Please, tell me. Sao Ding Haling. 2# is greater than what would you do if someone stole your entire life and smiled while doing it. The fluorescent lights in the waiting room of the family court buzz with a sound that drills directly into my frontal lobe. It is a low, insectile hum that never ceases, much like the headache that has taken up permanent residence behind my eyes for the last 6 months. My name is Emily Vance. I am 38 years old, a former senior architect at one of the most prestigious firms in Connecticut, a mother of 2 beautiful children, and currently, I am a woman waiting for a court-appointed lawyer to tell me whether I still have the right to call myself a mother. I look down at my hands. They are dry, the cuticles ragged. These are not the hands that used to draft blueprints for million-dollar coastal estates in Westport. These are the hands of a woman who scrapes together change for the laundromat and lives in a studio apartment above a failed dry cleaner. People look at me here and they see a stereotype. The bitter ex-wife, the woman who could not hold her liquor, the woman who lost her mind. But they do not know about the house. They do not know about the towel. They do not know about the smile that ruined my life. I need to tell you how it was before the rot set in. It is important that you understand I was not always this broken thing. 6 months ago, I was living in a masterpiece. That is not hyperbole. I designed our home on Maplewood Drive myself. It was a modern farmhouse restoration, 3,000 square feet of light and air, with wide plank oak floors that I hand-selected from a reclaimed barn in Vermont. Every sight line in that house was calculated. The way the morning sun hit the kitchen island where my 7-year-old son, Leo, ate his cereal. The way the bay window in the living room framed the old willow tree where my 5-year-old daughter, Sophie, liked to play tea party. I built that house to be a fortress for my family. I built it to protect us. I never imagined that the walls I erected would eventually be used to keep me out. My marriage to Mark was not perfect, but I thought it was functional. Mark was a consultant, a man of vague business dealings and expensive suits. Charming when he wanted to be, but inherently weak. He was the kind of man who would apologize to a waiter for sending back a cold soup, but then refuse to leave a tip. I was the spine of the family. I managed the bills, the schedules, the emotional climate. I managed his ego. We had been separated for 3 months. It was supposed to be a cooling off period, a term our marriage counselor used with a hopeful smile. Mark had stayed in the house, my house, because he claimed moving out would disrupt the routine of the children. I, being the pragmatic one, the one who always absorbed the shock to spare the others, agreed to rent a small condo nearby while we worked things out. I was stupid. I was so incredibly stupid. The morning the world tilted on its axis started with a phone call. It was barely 7 in the morning. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, a harsh intrusion into the restless sleep I had been managing lately. It was the hospital. My mother had collapsed at her nursing home, suspected heart failure. Panic is a cold sensation. It starts in the stomach and spreads to the fingertips. I needed to get to the hospital immediately, but I had the kids. It was Mark's weekend, but drop-off was not scheduled until 10 o'clock. I could not wait that long. I packed Leo and Sophie into the car with a frantic efficiency. Leo was complaining about his missing Nintendo Switch, and Sophie was crying because she had left her favorite stuffed rabbit inside. "We have to go." "Sweetie," I said, my voice tight. "Grandma is sick. Daddy will take care of you." I drove too fast down the winding roads that led back to Maplewood Drive. The autumn leaves were turning, a riot of red and gold that usually took my breath away. Today, they just looked like fire. I called Mark 3 times on the way. He did not answer. This was typical. Mark was not a morning person, and he often forgot to unmute his phone. I told myself he was probably in the shower or making coffee. I told myself it was fine. We were co-parenting. We were civil. I still had a key, though I had promised not to use it unless there was an emergency. This was an emergency. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked serene. My house, the slate roof I had fought the contractors over, looked magnificent in the morning drizzle. Mark's BMW was in the driveway. Good. He was home. "Stay in the car for a second. Guys," I told the kids, "let mommy go get daddy." I ran up the flagstone path. I did not use the key. I wanted to be respectful of his privacy, a courtesy he would later weaponize against me. I rang the doorbell. Once, twice. I waited. I could hear movement inside. Heavy footsteps? No. Lighter. The door clicked. I prepared my apology. "I am so sorry to barge in early, Mark, but Mom is in the emergency room, and I need you to take them now." The door swung open. The words died in my throat. They turned into ash and choked me. Standing in the doorway of the home I designed, framing herself against the foyer I had painted a soft dove gray, was a woman. She was young, perhaps 24 or 25. Her skin was that flawless, collagen-rich kind that makes you realize you have aged. She had wet, dark hair that clung to her shoulders, and she was wrapped in nothing but one of my white Egyptian cotton bath towels. Not a guest towel. My towel, the one with the monogrammed E embroidered in silver thread near the hem. She did not look shocked. She did not clutch the towel tighter in shame. She did not retreat. She leaned against the doorframe, a slow, languid movement, and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a cat that has just located the canary and found the cage door unlocked. "You are early," she said. Her voice was light, airy, unburdened by the gravity of the situation. I stood there, frozen. My brain was trying to process the visual data and failing. Who was this? Why was she wet? Why was she wearing my towel? Where was my husband? "Where is Mark?" I managed to ask. My voice sounded foreign, brittle. She giggled. "Horrible." Manufactured sound. "Mark is in the shower. We saw you, Xing Hao Ling. Ikke overslept." She shifted her weight, and the towel slipped slightly, revealing a flash of thigh. She made a show of adjusting it, tucking the fabric explicitly over her chest. It was a territorial display. She was marking her territory with steam and skin. "Who are you?" I demanded, stepping forward. "I am Jessica," she said, extending a hand as if we were at a cocktail party and she was not standing nearly naked in my doorway. "Mark has told me so much about you. Emily," he said, "you were Ling. Too intense. The word hung in the air like a slap. "Get Mark. Now," I hissed. "I told you. He is showering. You cannot just barge in here. It is rude," she pouted, a childish expression that looked grotesque on a grown woman. "You are invading our privacy." "Our privacy? This is my house," I said, my voice rising. I could feel the heat climbing up my neck. "My name is on the deed. My children are in the car. Get my husband down here before I walk past you and drag him out myself." Jessica's eyes narrowed. The playful facade vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. "It is Mark's house right now, and technically, since you moved out, you are a guest, and uninvited guests wait outside." She moved to close the door. I blocked it with my hand. I pushed. I am not a violent person, but the sight of this stranger, dripping wet on my hardwood floors, acting as if she were the lady of the manor, snapped something inside me. "Mark," I screamed into the hallway. "Mark, get down here. You are scaring me." Jessica whimpered, suddenly pitching her voice higher, louder, likely for the benefit of anyone listening inside. "Please, stop. You are hurting me." I was not touching her. I was holding the door, but she stumbled back theatrically, clutching the towel as if I had tried to rip it off. Then I saw him. Mark appeared at the top of the stairs. He was wearing his bathrobe, his hair messy, his face pale. He looked between me and the weeping girl in the towel, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He did not look at me with concern about his mother-in-law. He did not look at me with guilt for being caught with a mistress in our matrimonial home. He looked annoyed. "Emily, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted, coming down the stairs. He went straight to Jessica, placing a protective arm around her bare shoulders. "Are you okay, babe?" She pushed me. Jessica sobbed into his chest, casting a glance at me that was pure venom. She tried to break in. I was so scared. I did not push her. I screamed. I felt insane. The gaslighting was instantaneous. A practiced routine. "My mother is in the hospital. Mark, I came to drop off the kids, and I find this Ling. 2# is greater than this. Ling. 2# is greater than." I gestured helplessly at the woman wrapped in my monogram. "Do not call her names." Mark snapped. "This is Jessica. We are seeing each other. I was going to tell you, but I did not want you to overreact, which, clearly, you are doing right now." "Overreacting?" I laughed. A shrill, jagged sound. "She is wearing my towel." "Mark, she is in my house. It is just a towel." "Emily, God, you are so materialistic." Mark Sihu, shaking his head as if dealing with a toddler. "Look, if your mom is sick, that is terrible. I am sorry, but you cannot just ambush us like this. It is unhealthy. It creates a toxic environment." He was using the therapy words against me. "Toxic environment. I need to go to the hospital," I said, trembling. I felt like I was vibrating apart. Take the kids. Just Ling. 2 hashes greater than take the kids. I turned to leave, needing to escape the suffocating scent of her floral body wash that had already permeated the foyer. Wait, Jessica said. I stopped. I turned back. She was no longer crying. She was leaning into Mark, her hand resting possessively on his chest. She looked at me with a chilling calmness. Next time, she said softly, please call first. We might be busy, and maybe bring your own towels if you ever move back in. I think I am going to keep this one. It feels Ling. Dwa, Tuzi. Mark said nothing. He just stood there, his arm around her, letting her taunt the mother of his children. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run back in there and tear the house down, beam by beam. I wanted to smash the custom windows I had ordered from Germany. But I thought of my mother, lying in a hospital bed. I thought of Leo and Sophie, watching from the car window, their noses pressed against the glass, confused and frightened. So, I did the only thing I could do. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. You are welcome to him, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like ice. But the house? Do not get comfortable. Jessica, ghosts have a way of haunting the people who trespass. I slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot. As I walked back to the car, my legs feeling like lead, I saw the upstairs curtain move. Jessica was there, watching me. She waved, a tiny, finger-wiggling wave. I got into the car and looked at my children in the rearview mirror. Is Daddy okay? Leo asked. Daddy is fine. I lead. Daddy is just Ling. Too busy. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I told myself I would handle this later. I told myself I was strong. I told myself that Mark was just a midlife crisis cliché and Jessica was a temporary distraction. I was wrong. I had no idea that the girl in the towel was not just a mistress. She was a demolition crew, and that morning was not just an embarrassing encounter. It was the opening shot of a war that would strip me of everything I owned, everything I loved, and everything I thought I knew about myself. The smell of a hospital is distinct. It is a cocktail of antiseptic, floor wax, and stale coffee that settles in the back of the throat and refuses to leave. I sat in the plastic chair beside my mother's bed, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor. It was a steady, reassuring sound, proof of life in a room that felt suspended in time. My mother was sleeping, her face pale against the stark white sheets, looking smaller than I had ever remembered her. But my mind was not in that room. My mind was 3 miles away. Back on Maplewood Drive, it was stuck in a loop, replaying the same 10 seconds of horror over and over again. The click of the lock, the swing of the heavy oak door, the steam escaping from the foyer, and her, Jessica. I closed my eyes, but the image was burned into my retinas. I saw the water droplets clinging to her collarbone. I saw the way the white cotton of my towel contrasted with her tanned skin. That towel, I had bought those towels 3 years ago at a boutique in Greenwich. They were expensive, plush, the kind of luxury I told myself we deserved after Mark got his promotion. I remembered washing them for the first time, folding them, placing them in the master bath. They were intimate objects. They touched our skin when we were most vulnerable. And now, she was wearing it like a trophy. My phone buzzed in my lap. I looked down. The screen lit up with the name Mark. My heart hammered against my ribs. A part of me, the part that was still the dutiful wife of 12 years, Expected an apology. I expected him to say he was sorry for the ambush, sorry for the disrespect, sorry for introducing our children to his mistress in such a humiliating way. I slid my thumb across the screen and answered, "Mark," I whispered, stepping out into the hallway to avoid waking my mother. "You have a lot of nerve." "Emily," Mark's voice said. There was no apology. There was only cold, self-righteous anger. I blinked, stunned. "I have nerve?" "Mark, you had a strange woman half naked in our house when I came to drop off the children for an emergency. She was not half naked. She was covered. And she is not a strange woman. She is my partner." Mark corrected me, his tone clipped and professional, as if we were discussing a contract dispute rather than his infidelity. "You scared the hell out of her." "Emily, she was shaking for an hour after you left. Do you have any idea how traumatic it is to have someone bang on your door and scream like a banshee?" I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This was Mark's greatest talent. He could take reality, twist it, reshape it, and hand it back to you until you questioned your own sanity. I did not scream. I said, my voice trembling. I was shocked. "Mark, you cannot possibly think this is acceptable. The kids are fine." He interrupted. "Jessica made them pancakes. They are playing in the backyard. Actually, they are having a great time. They seem relieved to be in a house where there is not constant tension." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Constante tension. He was rewriting our history. He was painting me as the source of all misery, and himself and this towel-clad stranger as the sanctuary. "I want to speak to them," I said. "They are busy." Mark replied, "Look, Emily, we need to set some boundaries. You cannot just show up at the house anymore. I do not care what the emergency is. You call, you text, and you wait for a confirmation. If you violate my privacy again, I will have to speak to my lawyer about a restraining order for Jessica's safety." "Her safety?" I choked out a laugh. "I am 5'4". "Mark, I have never hurt a fly. You are unhinged today," he said, his voice lowering to a disappointed murmur. "I am worried about you. Emily, you sounded soothing. Dos numeral es mayor que un stable. Have you been drinking?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. He knew exactly which button to push. He knew about my struggle 3 years ago. The wine I used to numb the loneliness when he was working late. He knew I had been sober since the day I joined the support group, but he threw the accusation out casually, planting the seed. "I am sober." "Mark, you know that," I said, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. "If you say so," he said, unconvinced. "Just stay away from the house. We will drop the kids off on Sunday night." The line went dead. I stood in the hospital corridor, staring at my reflection in the glass of the nurse's station. I looked tired. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun. My eyes were rimmed with red. I looked like a woman who was losing. Mark was right about one thing. I did look unstable, but it was not because of alcohol. It was because my reality was being dismantled brick by brick. For the next 2 days, I sat by my mother's bedside, but my spirit was in agony. I imagined what was happening in my house. Was Jessica sitting on my sofa? Was she drinking from my mugs? Was she reading bedtime stories to my children? When Sunday evening arrived, I waited in the parking lot of my apartment complex. I lived in a complex called the Oaks, which was a euphemism for a collection of beige stucco buildings near the highway. It was temporary. I told myself, just until the divorce was finalized and I received my share of the house equity. Mark's BMW pulled up at 6 o'clock sharp. I walked out to meet them, forcing a smile onto my face for the sake of Leo and Sophie. The back doors opened, and my children spilled out. But something was different. Leo was holding a brand new iPad Pro. It was the large one, the model with the cellular data that cost over $1,000. He was clutching it to his chest like a treasure. Sophie hopped out of the car wearing a pair of glittering, high-top sneakers that lit up with every step. They were flashy, expensive, and completely impractical for a 5-year-old. "Mommy, look," Sophie squealed, pointing to her feet. "Jessica bought me magic shoes." I froze. I looked up at the driver's seat. Jessica was in the passenger seat. She did not get out. She just rolled down the window and lowered her sunglasses. She gave me a small, tight smile. It was the smile of a benevolent queen bestowing charity upon the peasants. "Hi, Emily," she called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "I hope your mom is feeling better. We just wanted to spoil the kids a little. They looked like they needed cheering up." "Leo," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my stomach. "You know the rules about screens. We do not have iPads." Jessica said it is okay. Leo said, not looking at me. His eyes were glued to the screen, where a violent cartoon was playing. "She said I can use it whenever I want because I am a big boy. And she said I am a princess," Sophie added, twirling to show off the shoes. "Mommy, Jessica says my old shoes were for babies. These are for princesses." Mark got out of the car and opened the trunk to get their overnight bags. He avoided my gaze. "You bought them off," I whispered to him as he handed me Leo's backpack. "You are trying to buy their affection. Do not be ungrateful," Mark hissed back. "Jessica is generous. She has her own money. You know, she comes from a very wealthy family. She just wants to be nice. Why can you not just be happy that someone else loves our kids?" Loves our kids. They had known her for 72 hours. "Take the iPad back," I said. "I do not want it in my house. It is Leo's property," Mark said, slamming the trunk. "If you take it away, you are just punishing him to spite me. Do not be that parent." "Emily," he got back in the car. As they drove away, I saw Jessica lean over and kiss Mark on the cheek. She looked back at me one last time, her expression unreadable behind the dark glass. I ushered the kids into my small, dimly lit apartment. It smelled of lemon pledge and old carpet, compared to the expansive, light-filled home they had just come from. It must have felt like a prison cell. "I miss the big house," Leo mumbled, throwing himself onto the futon. "I miss my room." "I know, baby," I said, trying to unlace Sophie's flashing shoes. She pulled her foot away. "No, I want to sleep in them," she cried. "Sophie, we do not wear shoes in bed," I said gently. "Jessica lets me," she screamed. "Jessica is fun." "You are mean." The words pierced me. "You are mean." I was the mother who made sure they ate vegetables. I was the mother who limited screen time so their brains would develop. I was the mother who enforced bedtimes. I was the structure. Jessica was the candy. And any child, given the choice, will choose the candy until their teeth rot. Later that night, after I finally got them to sleep, Sophie still wearing the light-up shoes, I sat alone at my small kitchen table. The silence of the apartment was oppressive. I opened my laptop. I needed to know who she was. I typed Jessica into the search bar, combined with Mark's last name. then realized she would not have his name. I searched Mark's friends list on Facebook. It was hidden, but Mark was careless with privacy settings on Instagram. I found her tagged in a photo from a month ago. Her handle was at Jessie_J_life. I clicked on her profile. It was public. My breath hitched in my throat. The most recent photo was posted 2 hours ago. It was a picture taken in my kitchen. The sunlight was streaming in, hitting the granite countertops I had selected. In the frame were Leo and Sophie. They were sitting at the island, eating pancakes piled high with whipped cream. Jessica was in the middle, her arms wrapped around them, squeezing them tight. They were all smiling. It looked like a perfect family portrait, but it was the caption that made me run to the bathroom and dry heave over the toilet. It read, "Sunday mornings with these angels. So blessed to step in and give them the love they deserve. Being a bonus mom is the hardest job, but someone has to do it. Hashtag family first. Hashtag my heart. Hashtag stepmom life. Hashtag rescued. Rescued." She used the word rescued, as if they were stray dogs she had pulled from a burning building, as if they were neglected, as if I did not exist. I scrolled down to the comments. "You are a saint." "Jess," wrote someone named Courtney, "those kids are lucky to have you," wrote another, and then a comment from a woman I recognized, Sarah Miller, the president of the Parent-Teacher Association at Leo's school, a woman I had baked cupcakes with, a woman I had hosted for coffee. Sarah had written, "They look so happy. Finally, you are doing a great job. Sweetie, stay strong." Finally, the word echoed in the empty chamber of my skull. Finally, as if they had been miserable before, as if my parenting was a dark period they had just emerged from. I realized then that this was not just about a mistress. This was a campaign. Jessica was not just stealing my husband. She was rewriting my identity. She was constructing a narrative where I was the cold, incompetent villain, and she was the warm, vibrant savior. I looked at the bottle of white wine sitting on top of the refrigerator. It had been a housewarming gift from my landlady. I had not touched it. It had sat there gathering dust for 3 weeks. My hand reached out. My fingers trembled. The condensation on the glass felt cool. One glass, just one glass to numb the sharp edges of the word rescued. One glass to silence the buzzing in my head. I gripped the neck of the bottle. I could almost taste the crisp, acidic relief. I pulled my hand back as if the glass were red hot. If I drank, they won. If I drank, Mark was right. If I drank, I became the unstable, alcoholic ex-wife they were already painting me to be. I grabbed the bottle and walked to the sink. I poured the contents down the drain. The wine glugged away, a pale yellow stream disappearing into the dark pipes. The smell of alcohol filled the tiny kitchen, taunting me. But I did not stop until the bottle was empty. I dropped the empty bottle into the recycling bin with a loud clatter. I walked back to the laptop. I looked at the picture of Jessica holding my children. "You want a war?" I whispered to the glowing screen. "You have no idea what you have started." But even as I said it, I felt a crack forming in my foundation. I was an architect. I knew about structural integrity. I knew that once a stress fracture appeared, it only took a little more pressure to bring the whole building down. And looking at that smile, that triumphant, entitled smile, I feared that Jessica knew exactly where to apply the pressure. The first crack had appeared, and the weight of the world was pressing down. Displacement is a physical sensation. It starts as a hollow ache in the chest, a phantom limb syndrome where the missing limb is your entire life. For 3 weeks, I had been living out of suitcases in a studio apartment that smelled of other people's cooking. But my ghost was still walking the hallways of the house on Maplewood Drive. I drove toward the house to pick up the children for my designated visitation hours. The legal term was visitation, as if I were a distant aunt or a family friend dropping by, rather than the woman who had carried them in her body. The tires of my sedan crunched over the gravel of the driveway, a sound that used to signal safety. Arrival. Home. Now, it sounded like an intrusion. I turned the final curve of the driveway, and my foot slammed onto the brake pedal instinctively. I sat there, the engine idling, staring through the windshield, my breath caught in my throat, a sharp, jagged intake of air that tasted of exhaust and shock. They were gone. The rose garden. My rose garden. I had spent 5 years cultivating that garden. I had planted David Austin roses, the expensive English variety that smelled of myrrh and fruit. I had knelt in that dirt every spring, pruning, feeding, coaxing life out of the Connecticut clay. It was where I went when Mark was cold. It was where I went when I felt invisible. It was the one part of the property that was entirely, undeniably mine. Now, it was a mud pit. A small excavator sat idle in the middle of the churned earth, its yellow arm resting like a broken limb. The meticulously arranged trellis was smashed into splinters, piled up like trash. The bushes, my beautiful, established bushes that were just about to go dormant for the winter, had been ripped out by the roots and tossed into a dumpster that sat garishly on the lawn. I got out of the car. My legs felt numb. I walked toward the destruction, my boots sinking into the wet grass. The smell of raw earth was overwhelming. It smelled like a grave. "Emily, what are you doing?" I heard the voice before I saw him. Mark was standing on the porch. He looked thinner than I remembered, his shoulders hunched in his cashmere sweater. He did not look like a man in love. He looked like a man under siege. "Where are my roses?" I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. I did not scream. This was past screaming. This was the cold, dead center of grief. Mark Sehill, rubbing his temples. Jessica felt the energy was wrong. She said the thorns were creating aggressive chi. It was bad for the flow of abundance into the house. Aggressive chi? I repeated the words slowly, tasting the absurdity of them. You let her destroy $5,000 worth of landscaping because of bad energy? She wants to put in a koi pond, Mark said, looking away from me, staring at the mud. Water attracts wealth. It is a feng shui cure. She says the house has been stagnant for too long. Stagnant? That was her word for my life. That was her word for the home I built. The front door opened. Jessica stepped out. She was wearing a white silk robe that swept the floor, holding a mug of herbal tea with both hands. She looked serene, glowing, completely untouched by the violence of the machinery on the lawn. "Hello? Emily," she said. Her voice was soft, compassionate, the way one speaks to a mental patient. "I hope you do not mind. I know you liked those flowers, but they were so Sauting Ketu, thorn." It felt hostile. A pond will be much more soothing for the children. Leo is so excited to feed the fish. She was using my children as a shield. Again, this is joint property. "Jessica," I said. Stepping closer, I could see the sudden tightening around her eyes. She did not like being challenged. "We have not settled the assets. You cannot just tear up the land." Mark stepped between us. "Technically, Emily, as the primary resident. I have the right to make improvements to the property. It increases the resale value. Improvements? I pointed at the dumpster where the root ball of my prize, winning Westerland rose, was sticking out, naked and dead. You call this an improvement? I am doing this for us, Jessica said, tilting her head. For our future family. The energy in this house was so heavy, so sad. I am just trying to let the light in. I looked at her. I really looked at her. Underneath the expensive skincare and the false lashes, I saw something brittle. She was not just entitled. She was frantic. She was marking her territory with the desperation of an animal that knows it does not belong. I need to use the restroom, I said. Mark blocked my path. Emily. No, the kids are getting their shoes on. Just wait here. I am not waiting on the porch like a delivery driver. Mark. I walked past him. He reached out to grab my arm, but then pulled back. He knew better than to touch me when I looked like this. I walked into the house. If the garden was a shock, the interior was a violation. The foyer was unrecognizable. The antique console table I had found at an estate sale in Charleston was gone. In its place stood a modern, mirrored sculpture that looked sharp and dangerous. The walls, which I had painted a warm, creamy oatmeal color, were now a stark, clinical white. The air smelled different. The scent of vanilla and old books was gone, replaced by the pungent, smoky smell of burning sage. She had been smudging the house. She had been exorcising me. I walked toward the kitchen. The open concept living room was stripped bare of personality. The gallery wall of family photos, the black and white candid shots of the children playing at the beach, the portrait of us at our 10th anniversary was gone. The wall was blank, save for a large, abstract painting that looked like a bloodstain. It was as if I had never existed. I turned. Leo was standing by the kitchen island. He looked small in the vast, white space. He was holding his backpack. Hey, buddy, I said, forcing my face to soften. I knelt down to hug him. He felt stiff in my arms. Jessica says we are getting fish, Leo whispered. Big orange ones. That sounds Sao Yu, Jing Hao, Ling. 2 hash is greater than interesting. I lead. I stood up. My eyes scanned the kitchen island. This had always been the command center of our home. It was where the mail lived, where the permission slips were signed, where the bills were sorted. Mark had always been messy with paperwork, but I had created a system, a basket for bills, a basket for personal mail. The baskets were gone. In their place was a crystal bowl filled with lemons. Feng shui again, but pushed to the far corner of the granite, half hidden behind a towering espresso machine that I did not recognize, was a stack of envelopes. I do not know why I looked. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the architect in me noticing a structural anomaly. The stack was messy, hasty. It did not match the curated perfection of Jessica's new regime. I walked over. Emily, let us go. Mark's voice boomed from the hallway. He sounded panicked. I reached out and grabbed the stack. The top letter was innocuous. A flyer for a landscaping company. I flipped it. The second envelope was from the credit card company, American Express Platinum. But the text on the front was not the usual promotional offer. It was red, bold uppercase letters stamped across the front. Final notice. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my spine. Mark made a good salary. We had savings. Why would he have a final notice? I flipped to the next one. A letter from the bank that held our mortgage. Chase Home Lending. I tore it open. My fingers were shaking. I heard Mark's footsteps thudding rapidly across the hardwood floor, but I was faster. I unfolded the letter. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. The words swam before my eyes. Saoyuting 2# is greater than failure to pay the monthly installments for the months of August, September, and October. Saoyuting 2# is greater than total amount due immediately, $12,450. Saoyuting R. Dayu. August. We were still living together in August. He had stopped paying the mortgage 3 months ago. Before I moved out, before Jessica moved in, I looked at the next letter. It was a collection agency notice for a personal loan I did not know existed. $50,000. Taken out 6 months ago. My head spun. The renovations, the designer clothes, the koi pond, the expensive gifts for the children, the hotel stays during our separation. Mark was not just living beyond his means. He was drowning. He was completely, catastrophically broke. Emily, Mark snatched the papers from my hand. His face was a mask of sheer terror. His eyes darted to the hallway where Jessica was standing with Sophie. "What is that?" Jessica asked. Drifting into the kitchen, she looked from Mark's pale face to my stunned expression. "Is everything okay?" I looked at Mark. He was pleading with me, silent, desperate, begging. If I spoke, if I told her right now that her wealthy boyfriend was actually a man standing on the edge of bankruptcy, that the house she was redecorating was about to be seized by the bank, the illusion would shatter, and Jessica, a woman who demanded David Austin roses be ripped out for a wealth-attracting pond, she would not stay for a man with a zero balance. Mark gripped my arm. "Hard, please." He hissed under his breath. Not now. He was terrified of her leaving. He was more afraid of losing his trophy mistress than he was of losing the roof over his children's heads. I looked at Jessica. She was frowning, sensing the tension, but misinterpreting the source. "Just some junk mail," Mark said, his voice cracking. "Emily was just Saoyuting Ling. 2# is greater than being nosy." "Junk mail?" I repeated. My mind raced. This was ammunition. This was the weapon I had been looking for. But it was also a ticking time bomb. If the house went into foreclosure, my equity, the money I needed to start a new life, the money for the children's future, would vanish. I looked at my children. Leo was watching us with wide, anxious eyes. If I blew this up now, the explosion would take us all down. I took a step back. I smoothed my coat. "Yes," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Just Junk. You should really be more organized." "Mark, clutter creates bad energy. Is that not right?" Jessica beamed, oblivious. "Exactly. I keep telling him that." I looked at Mark one last time. The power dynamic in the room had shifted. He was no longer the man in charge. He was a hostage to his own lies. And now, I held the key to his cell. "I will take the kids now," I said. I walked out of the kitchen, past the spot where our family photos used to hang. I ushered Leo and Sophie out the front door, past the mutilated garden, past the dumpster filled with the wreckage of my hard work. As I buckled Sophie into her car seat, my hands were trembling, but not from grief. Not anymore. I was trembling with adrenaline. I climbed into the driver's seat and looked back at the house. Jessica was standing in the window, waving. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully displaced me, erased me. and claimed my kingdom. She had no idea she had just moved into a sinking ship, and for the first time in months, as I put the car in gear and drove away from the impending disaster on Maplewood Drive, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. I knew something she did not. The water in her new pond was not going to bring wealth. It was going to drown them both. The silence in my apartment was not peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums like deep water. It had been 3 days since I discovered the foreclosure notices in Mark's kitchen. 3 days since I realized that my financial security was tied to an anchor that was rapidly sinking. I sat on the edge of my futon, staring at the rain streaking down the single window of the studio. Outside, the world was gray and weeping. Inside, it was just cold. I had tried to call my lawyer, a weary woman named Brenda who operated out of a strip mall. I told her about the foreclosure letters. She had sighed, the sound of a woman who had heard this story 1,000 times. If the house is underwater, Emily, there is no equity to split. She had said, you cannot get blood from a stone. If he declares bankruptcy, the asset seizure could take years. You need to brace yourself. Brace myself. I had been bracing myself for 6 months. My muscles were locked in a permanent state of tension. My jaw ached from grinding my teeth in my sleep. My mother was fading in a nursing home that cost $6,000 a month. Money I was rapidly running out of. My children were being brainwashed by a woman who treated them like accessories to her lifestyle. And my ex-husband was a financial corpse walking. I stood up and walked to the kitchenette. My hands were shaking. It was a fine tremor, barely noticeable, but I felt it. It was the vibration of a machine that was running too hard. For too long, without oil. I opened the cupboard, empty. I grabbed my keys. I did not make a conscious decision to go to the liquor store. It felt like I was sleepwalking. I drove the 3 blocks to the corner store, the windshield wipers slapping a hypnotic rhythm against the glass. Back and forth, back and forth. I walked into the store. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully. I went straight to the wine aisle. I did not look at the clerk. I did not look at the other customers. I focused on the labels. Pinot Grigio, California, $12. I bought it. I bought a pack of breath mints, 2, just in case. Back in my apartment, I sat at the small, a wobbly table. I unscrewed the cap. The crack of the seal breaking sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Just 1 glass. I told myself to sleep, just to turn off the noise in my head for 1 night. I poured the pale yellow liquid into a coffee mug because I did not own wine glasses anymore. I brought the rim to my lips. The smell was sharp, acidic, and incredibly familiar. It smelled like the nights I used to spend waiting for Mark to come home from work, wondering why he smelled like perfume. I took a sip. The warmth hit my stomach almost instantly. The knot of anxiety in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. My shoulders dropped an inch. See? I thought, I am in control. It is medicine. I finished the mug. I poured another. I sat there in the dim light, scrolling through photos on my phone. Photos of the house when it was new. Photos of the garden before the slaughter. Photos of Leo and Sophie before they knew what the word stepmom meant. I drank until the photos blurred. I drank until the rain outside sounded like applause. I drank until I passed out with my head on the table, the empty bottle standing guard like a sentry. I woke up to the sound of my alarm screaming. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. My mouth tasted like copper and regret. I sat up, groaning, and knocked the empty bottle onto the floor. It rolled across the linoleum with a hollow, accusing rattle. Panic flooded my system. Today was Thursday. I had to pick up the kids for school. It was my morning to drive the carpool. I scrambled to the bathroom. I stared at my reflection. My skin was gray. My eyes were bloodshot. I looked like a wreck. Pull it together. Emily, you are fine. You just need coffee. Lots of coffee. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the scent of failure. I brushed my teeth 3 times. I gargled with mouthwash until my tongue burned. I popped 2 breath mints into my mouth. I dressed in my most professional clothes. A crisp white shirt, a navy blazer, armor. I drove to Maplewood Drive. The headache was blinding. The morning sun reflected off the wet asphalt, piercing my eyes like needles. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel when I pulled into the driveway. The construction crew was already there. They were digging the hole for the pond. The noise of the machinery was deafening. Clang, thud, grind. I parked and walked to the front door. I checked my breath one last time in my cupped hand. Mint, just mint. The door opened before I could knock. Jessica stood there. She was dressed in yoga pants and a sports bra, holding a green smoothie. She looked disgustingly healthy. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on the dark circles under my eyes that concealer could not quite hide. You look rough, she said. No hello, just an observation delivered with a smirk. I have a migraine. I lead, my voice raspy. Are the kids ready? Mark is helping them with their bags. Leo forgot his math book again. Honestly, Emily, I do not know how you manage their homework schedule. It is chaotic. She stepped closer. She invaded my personal space. She sniffed. It was subtle, a tiny flare of her nostrils, but I saw it. Her eyes widened slightly. A gleam of predatory delight sparked in her pupils. Is that Sauiting Howling? Iki? Listerna? She asked, tilting her head. You smell like you bathed in mouthwash. I told you, I have a migraine. I was sick this morning, I said, stepping back. My heart was hammering against my ribs. She knows. She smells it, the metabolizing alcohol seeping through my pores. You were sick? Jessica repeated, her voice rising artificially loud. Oh my God. Emily, are you hungover? I am not hungover. I snapped. The volume of my voice was too high. I winced at the sound of it. Mark, Jessica called out, turning her head toward the stairs. Mark, come here, quickly. Mark appeared in the hallway, holding Leo's backpack. Sophie was clinging to his leg. What is it? What is wrong? Mark asked, looking between us. Come smell her, Jessica said, pointing a manicured finger at me. She reeks of alcohol. She is drunk. Mark, she came to drive the children to school while she is drunk. I am not drunk, I yelled. The denial sounded guilty even to my own ears. I had a glass of wine last night to help me sleep. That is it. I am completely sober. Mark walked over to me. He leaned in, sniffing tentatively. He recoiled. Emily, he said, his face twisting in disgust. You smell like a brewery. It is the mouthwash, I pleaded. I swear. Mark, I am fine. Look at me. I am walking straight. I am talking fine. You are shouting. Jessica interjected. She pulled her phone out of her waistband. She held it up. The red recording dot was already blinking. I am recording this for our safety, she announced calmly. We cannot let you take the children if you are intoxicated. It is a danger to their lives. Put the phone away. I warned, stepping toward her. "Do not touch me." Jessica shrieked, backing away as if I had pulled a knife. "Mark, she is aggressive. Look at her eyes. She is unhinged." "Emily, leave," Mark said, stepping in front of Jessica. "You are not taking the kids. It is my day." I screamed. The frustration, the headache, the shame, it all boiled over. "You cannot do this. I am their mother. I am sober. You are an alcoholic who fell off the wagon," Mark said coldly. "I knew it. I told my lawyer this would happen. You cannot handle the pressure. So you drink, go home. Emily, sleep it off before I call the police and have you breathalyzed in front of your children." I looked at Leo and Sophie. They were standing by the stairs, watching. Leo looked terrified. Sophie was crying silently, clutching her new light-up shoes. They were seeing their mother screaming, red-faced, smelling of mint and stale wine. They were seeing a monster. "Leo, Sophie," I choked out, reaching a hand toward them. "Mommy is okay. Mommy is just tired." "Do not," Jessica said sharply. She walked over to the kids and ushered them into the kitchen. "Come on, sweeties, let us get some hot cocoa. Mommy needs to go for a timeout." "Timeout." She spoke to me like I was a toddler. I stood there in the foyer, shaking. The trap had snapped shut. I had walked right into it. I had given them exactly what they needed. "Get out," Mark said, opening the door, "and do not come back until you are clean." "I mean it. Emily, if you show up here smelling like booze again, I will file for sole custody. I will not let you drag them down with you." I stumbled out onto the porch. The rain was coming down harder now. It soaked through my blazer instantly. I walked to my car. I did not look back. I could not bear to see Jessica in the window again. I knew what she was doing. She was saving that video. She was sending it to Mark's lawyer. She was archiving my destruction. I got into my car and locked the doors. I gripped the steering wheel and screamed. A raw, guttural sound that tore at my throat. I had lost. I had handed them the ammunition they needed to execute me. But as I sat there, shivering in the cold car, a thought pierced through the haze of self-loathing. Mark had said, "I told my lawyer this would happen." He expected it. He was waiting for it. And Jessica, she had been too ready with that phone. Too ready with the accusation. They were pushing me. They were poking the animal through the bars of the cage, waiting for it to bite so they could put it down. I looked at my shaking hands. Never again. I vowed I will never take another sip. But as I drove away, the image of the red recording dot blinking on Jessica's phone burned in my mind. The damage was done. The spiral had begun, and I was falling fast. And the worst part was, I had pushed myself off the ledge. A birthday cake is a promise. It is a circle of sugar and flour that says, "I celebrate the day you breathed your first breath. I am glad you are here." I sat in the kitchenette of my studio apartment, staring at the cake I had spent 4 hours baking. It was a chocolate sponge, Leo's favorite, covered in a ganache that had not set quite right. It looked lumpy. It looked amateur. It looked like a cake baked by a woman whose hands had been trembling the entire time she held the spatula. Today was Leo's 8th birthday. I had texted Mark 3 times regarding the pickup time, the custody agreement. That hateful, binding document stated that, on birthdays, the parents would split the day. Mark had the morning. I was supposed to have the evening. I had planned a small dinner, just pizza and this sad, lumpy cake, and the Lego set I had saved up to buy. It was not much, but it was ours. At 4 o'clock, my phone finally pinged. It was not a text from Mark. It was an Instagram notification. At Jessie_J_life is live. My stomach turned over. I knew I should not look. I knew that opening that app was an act of emotional self-immolation, but my thumb hovered over the screen, betraying me. I tapped it. The screen filled with noise and color. I was looking at my backyard, but it was not the backyard I knew. It had been transformed into a carnival. There was a bouncy castle in the shape of a dragon. There was a cotton candy machine spinning pink clouds of sugar. There were tables draped in white linen, covered in tiered platters of gourmet food. And there were people, dozens of them, parents from Leo's school, neighbors who used to wave to me when I checked the mail. They were drinking champagne from flutes, laughing, basking in the golden afternoon sun. The camera panned around, shaky and enthusiastic, held by Jessica. "Happy birthday to our big boy," Jessica's voice narrated, shrill with excitement. "Look at this turnout. We just wanted to give him the world." The camera landed on Leo. He was wearing a custom-made suit. A suit for an 8-year-old running around a backyard. And a sash that said "Birthday King." He looked overwhelmed. He looked small. Then the camera turned to face Jessica. She was wearing a pale blue dress that hugged her waist, her hair perfectly blown out. She winked at the camera. "So grateful to be his bonus mom," she said. "We decided to keep the party going all night. Who needs a quiet dinner when you can have magic?" All night. She was not bringing him to me. They were keeping him. They were erasing my time. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence. The smell of chocolate suddenly nauseating. They had not invited me. They had not even told me. They were holding a coronation for my son in my own home, and I was the exiled queen. I looked at the clock. 4:15. I looked at the bottle of vodka on the counter. I had bought it yesterday, just in case. That was the lie I told myself. Just in case I needed to clean a wound. Just in case the world became too sharp to handle without a buffer. I did not bother with a glass this time. I took a long, burning pull straight from the bottle. The liquid fire seared my throat, but the relief was instantaneous. The sharp edges of the room softened. The voice in my head that said, "You are a failure," became a little quieter. I took another drink, and another. "They cannot take his birthday," I whispered to the empty room. "They took the house. They took the roses. They cannot take the day I gave birth to him." I stood up. The room swayed slightly, but I steadied myself against the counter. I grabbed the lumpy chocolate cake. I grabbed my car keys. I knew, somewhere in the deep, rational part of my brain, that driving was a mistake. I knew showing up uninvited was a catastrophe waiting to happen, but the rage was steering the ship now. The rage and the vodka. I drove to Maplewood Drive. The drive was a blur of asphalt and resentment. When I turned onto the street, I had to park 3 houses down because the driveway and the street front were packed with luxury SUVs. I walked up the driveway, carrying the cake box like a shield. I could hear the music. It was a live band playing a jazz cover of a pop song. Sophisticated, expensive. I walked around the side of the house to the backyard gate. I did not ring the doorbell. I just pushed the gate open. The party stopped. It rippled through the crowd like a wave. The conversation died. The laughter choked off. Heads turned. Eyes widened. I stood there, slightly disheveled, clutching a cardboard box, swaying in my boots. "Mom?" Leo's voice cut through the silence. He was standing near the bouncy castle, holding a slice of professionally decorated cake. He looked terrified. "Happy birthday, baby," I called out. My voice was too loud, too slurred. "Mommy brought you a real cake, not that store-bought trash." Mark pushed through the crowd. He was wearing a linen suit, looking every inch the successful patriarch. When he saw me, his face went white, then a deep, furious red. "Emily," he hissed. Marching over to me, he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "What the hell are you doing here? You are drunk. It is my son's birthday," I said, pulling my arm away. I stumbled slightly. The cake box tilted. "I have a right to be here. I am his mother. You are embarrassing him," Mark whispered, his teeth clenched. "Look at everyone staring. You are a mess. Leave. Now." "No," I said. I pushed past him. I walked into the center of the patio. I saw Sarah Miller, the Parent-Teacher Association president, looking at me with open pity and disgust. I saw my old neighbors averting their eyes. Then I saw Jessica. She was standing on the raised stone steps that led up to the back door, positioned like a statue on a pedestal. She held a glass of sparkling water. She looked down at me with a mix of fear and triumph. She knew she had won. She had baited the trap, and I had walked right into the jaws of it. "Emily," Jessica said, her voice trembling perfectly, "please, you are scaring the children." "Scaring them?" I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "I am the only one who loves them. You are just playing house. You are a fraud, Jessica, a gold-digging fraud." I took a step toward the stairs. I wanted to look her in the eye. I wanted to wipe that benevolent smirk off her face. "Stay back," Jessica cried out, placing a hand protectively over her stomach. "Do not come near me." "Why?" I taunted, taking another step. The alcohol made me reckless. "Are you afraid I will tell them about the letters? About the debt? About how this whole party is paid for with money that does not exist?" Mark lunged for me. "Emily, stop it." I swung around to face him, and in the chaos, the cake box slipped from my hands. It hit the stone patio with a wet, heavy splat. The box burst open. My lumpy, homemade chocolate cake, the labor of my love, was reduced to a pile of brown sludge on the pristine limestone. The crowd gasped. I looked down at the ruined cake. Tears pricked my eyes. It was so pathetic, so broken, just like me. "You ruined it," I sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at Jessica. "You ruin everything." I charged up the steps. I did not want to hurt her. I just wanted to scream in her face. I wanted her to hear me. Jessica's eyes went wide. As I reached the top step, she did not retreat. Instead, she took a subtle, calculated step backward, not onto the landing, but into the empty air above the next tier of stairs leading down to the basement entrance. It happened in slow motion. I reached out, perhaps to grab her, perhaps to steady myself. My fingertips barely grazed the silk of her dress. Jessica threw her arms up. She screamed, a high, piercing sound that shattered the afternoon air. "No, do not push me," she shrieked, and then she threw herself backward. It was a performance. I saw the tension in her legs as she launched herself, but to the 50 people watching from the lawn, it looked like a violent shove. She tumbled down the 5 stone steps. She landed at the bottom in a heap of blue silk and limbs. Silence descended. Absolute, terrifying silence. Then Jessica began to wail. "My baby," she screamed, clutching her stomach. "Oh God, my baby. She killed my baby." The world stopped spinning. "Baby?" Mark sprinted past me, nearly knocking me over. He slid to his knees beside her. "Jessica, oh my God, call 911. Someone call 911. I stood at the top of the stairs, my hand still outstretched, frozen in horror. I looked at the crowd. Every single pair of eyes was fixed on me. There was no pity anymore. There was only hatred. I looked for Leo. He was standing by the bouncy castle, his face buried in the chest of Sarah Miller. Sobbing, he would not look at me. I heard the sirens in the distance. They grew louder, a rising wail that matched the screaming in my head. I did not run. I could not move. I just stood there, swaying, smelling the vodka on my own breath, watching Mark cradle the woman who had just destroyed my life with a single, fake fall. When the police officers arrived, they did not ask for my side of the story. They saw a woman at the bottom of the stairs screaming about a miscarriage. They saw a drunk ex-wife standing at the top. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer said. His voice was cold. The handcuffs clicked shut. The metal was biting into my wrists. It was cold and final. As they marched me past the party guests, past the ruined cake, past my weeping son, Mark looked up from where he was kneeling. His eyes were dry, and for a split second, behind the mask of the concerned partner, I saw it. Relief. "I am taking full custody," he said. It was not a shout. It was a statement of fact. "You will never hurt this family again." They put me in the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat smelled of vomit and disinfectant. As the car pulled away, I watched my house, the house I designed, the house I built, disappear from view. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. I had not just lost the battle, I had nuked the battlefield, and I was the only casualty. This was the point of no return. The concept of rock bottom is misleading. People speak of it as a solid surface, a place where the falling stops and you can finally stand up and brush off the dust. But that is a lie. Rock bottom is not a floor. It is a swamp. It is a dark, sucking mud that pulls you down by the ankles, filling your mouth with silt until you stop struggling and let yourself drown. For 48 hours after the meeting with Mark, I sat in that swamp. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, staring at the settlement offer that lay on my coffee table like a dormant explosive. The legal language was precise and sterile, stripping me of my rights with the efficiency of a surgeon removing a gangrenous limb. Mark wanted the house. He wanted the children. He wanted my dignity signed over in triplicate. But on the third morning, something changed. It was not a sudden burst of hope. It was something colder. It was the realization that the law was not designed to protect the truth. It was designed to protect the person with the best paperwork. Mark had the paperwork. He had the foreclosure notices hidden in a drawer, and he had the protective order against me. He was playing a game of chess while I was still trying to figure out why he had flipped the table. I stood up. I walked to the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was gaunt. Her eyes were hollow, but the weeping was over. Tears were for people who still believed that fairness was a natural law of the universe. I no longer believed in fairness. I believed in leverage. I went to my closet and pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside was my emergency fund. It was not much, just $3,000 in cash that I had squirreled away years ago from freelance design jobs, hiding it from Mark's reckless spending habits. I put the cash in an envelope, Then I picked up the phone, not to call Brenda. Brenda played by the rules. I needed someone who knew how to read the writing on the bottom of the gutter. I called a number given to me by a contractor I used to work with, a man who knew how to make zoning problems disappear. I need a background check. I told the voice on the other end, a deep one, the kind that requires a shovel. We met in a diner near the interstate, a place that smelled of burnt grease and cigarette smoke that had seeped into the vinyl booths decades ago. The man sitting opposite me was named Ray. He was heavy, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and then left out in the rain to erode. He did not look like a private investigator from the movies. He looked like a man who fixed plumbing disasters. Ray slid a thick manila envelope across the sticky table. He did not smile. You were right to be suspicious. Mistress Vance, Ray said, his voice a low rumble. Your girl, Jessica, is a ghost. I put my hand on the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. What did you find? I asked. Ray took a sip of his black coffee. Her name is not Jessica. At least, it has not been Jessica for long. She was born Vanessa Rayburn in Tampa, Florida, but she has also been Monica St. James in Arizona, and Tiffany Cole in Texas. I opened the envelope. The first thing I saw was a grid of driver license photos. 4 different names, 4 different hairstyles. Blonde, redhead, brunette. But the eyes were the same. Those wide, predatory eyes that knew exactly how to look at a man to make him feel like a king. She moves in 3-year cycles, Ray explained, pointing a thick finger at the timeline he had constructed. She targets men in their late 40s or early 50s. Men who are professionally successful but emotionally vulnerable, usually men going through a midlife crisis or a divorce. I looked at the dates. 2018, Arizona. She married a real estate developer named Gary Thorne. 6 months later, she filed for divorce citing emotional abuse. She walked away with a settlement of $200,000 to avoid a public trial. 2021, Texas. She was engaged to a petroleum engineer. The engagement ended when she claimed to have a miscarriage due to stress caused by his ex-wife. He bought her a condo to make up for the loss. She sold it 3 months later and vanished. I felt a chill run down my spine. The pattern was identical. The vulnerability, the conflict with the ex-wife, the tragic victimhood. She is a professional, I whispered. She is a grinder. Ray corrected. She grinds them down. She finds the weak spot, usually guilt or ego, and she drills until she hits a nerve. But here is the interesting part. He flipped the page to a photocopy of a medical billing record. It was grainy, stamped with the header of a clinic in Miami. You asked me to look into the pregnancy claim, Ray said, since she is claiming your assault caused a threatened miscarriage. I figured her medical history was fair game. It took some doing to get this. Do not ask me how. I looked at the document. It was dated 3 years ago. The patient name was Vanessa Rayburn. The procedure code was complex, but Ray had highlighted the description in yellow marker. Laparoscopic bilateral salpingectomy. I looked up at Ray, confused. I am an architect, not a doctor. What is this? It means she had her tubes removed. Mistress Vance, both of them, permanently. It is a form of sterilization. The diner went silent around me. The clatter of silverware, the hum of the refrigerator, the chatter of the truck drivers. It all faded into a dull roar. She cannot get pregnant, I said. The words tasted like ash. Ray shook his head. Unless she had a miracle. No, It is physically impossible for an egg to reach the uterus. She is not pregnant. Mistress Vance. She was never pregnant. The fall down the stairs, the screaming about the baby, it was all theater. I closed my eyes. I saw Jessica at the top of the stairs. I saw the way she had positioned herself. I saw the way she had stepped back into the air. It was not fear. It was choreography. She had staged her own murder, or at least the murder of a fictitious child, to destroy me. She is doing this to force the sale of the house. I said, my mind racing, connecting the dots that had been invisible until now. She thinks Mark is rich. She thinks if she forces him to liquidate the asset, my house, she can take a cut of the equity as a settlement for the miscarriage and run before anyone realizes Mark is actually broke. Ray raised an eyebrow. The husband is broke? He is drowning. I said, he has been hiding debt for months. He is pushing for the sale because he needs the cash to pay off loans before the bank forecloses. Jessica is pushing for the sale because she wants to cash out her con. They are two parasites trying to feed off the same dying host. Ray chuckled darkly, and neither of them knows the other one is starving. I looked down at the pile of papers. This was it. This was the leverage. If I walked into a courtroom with this, I could destroy her credibility. I could prove the assault charge was based on a lie. I could prove she was a fraud, but a courtroom battle would take months. Mark's foreclosure was weeks away, and in the meantime, my children were living in a house with a sociopath who viewed them as nothing more than props in her con artistry. I needed something faster than the law. I needed to blow up the foundation while they were both still inside the building. Can I keep these? I asked, tapping the file. You paid for them. Ray said, they are yours. But be careful. Mistress Vance, a woman like that, Vanessa, Jessica, whatever she calls herself, she does not have a reverse gear. If you corner her, she will not surrender. She will attack. I put the papers back into the envelope. I thought about the way she had looked at me when I was handcuffed. The smug satisfaction, the total lack of remorse. I am counting on it, I said. I left the diner and walked to my car. The envelope sat on the passenger seat. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the plan form in my mind. It was a dangerous plan. It required me to lie. It required me to walk back into the lion's den without a weapon in my hand, hiding the knife until the very last second. I pulled over in a parking lot overlooking the city. I dialed Brenda's number. Brenda, I said when she answered. Call Mark. Tell him I accept the deal. Emily, are you sure? Brenda asked, her voice filled with concern. You are signing away your life. Just tell him, I said, keeping my voice flat and defeated. Tell him I'm broken. Tell him I will sign the house over to him. Tell him I will agree to the custody arrangement. There was a pause on the line. Okay, I will draft the paperwork. But Brenda, I added, there is one condition. The one we discussed. The location? Brenda asked. Yes, I want to sign the papers at the house. In the kitchen, tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. And I want Jessica there. Why Jessica? Brenda asked. The protective order says you cannot be near her. Tell Mark that I want to apologize to her. I lead. Tell him I want to ask for her forgiveness in person before I vanish from their lives. Tell him it is the only way I can find closure. I knew Mark. I knew his ego. He would love the idea of me groveling. He would love the image of his ex-wife begging for forgiveness from his new, younger model. And Jessica? She would want to be there to gloat. She would want to see the moment the ink dried and the money became real. I will see what I can do. Brenda said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the dossier one more time. I pulled out the photo of Jessica, Vanessa, smiling on the arm of her previous victim in Texas. She looked so happy, so innocent. I touched the cold glass of the car window. You want the house. Jessica, I whispered to the photo. You want the money? You want the life I built brick by brick? Come and get it. I started the engine. The engine roared to life. A deep, mechanical growl that matched the fury burning in my chest. I was not the victim anymore. I was the architect, and I was about to design a collapse so spectacular that, when the dust settled, there would be nothing left of their lies but rubble. I drove home to my empty apartment. I did not turn on the lights. I sat in the dark and rehearsed my lines. I practiced the slump of my shoulders. I practiced the tremble in my voice. I practiced the look of a defeated woman. I had to be perfect. Because tomorrow, I was not just fighting for a house. I was fighting for the souls of my children. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who the villain was. And it was not me. News travels fast in a small town, but scandal travels at the speed of light. In the affluent suburbs of Connecticut, reputation is a currency more valuable than Bitcoin, and I had just declared bankruptcy. The video of the incident at the birthday party had not gone viral globally, but it had saturated the local ecosystem. It was in the group chats of the Parent-Teacher Association. It was whispered about at the tennis club. It was dissected over Pinot Grigio in every living room within a 5-mile radius. I was no longer Emily Vance, the respected architect and devoted mother. I was the unhinged ex-wife, the alcoholic, the woman who pushed a pregnant saint down a flight of stone stairs. I ventured out of my apartment only once in the days following my meeting with the private investigator. I needed milk. It was a mundane necessity, but it felt like a tactical mission into enemy territory. I walked into the local Whole Foods. I wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, pulled low. I kept my head down, studying the scuff marks on the linoleum floor as if they were blueprints. I reached the dairy aisle and reached for a carton of almond milk. I cannot believe she showed her face here. The whisper was loud, theatrical. It was meant to be heard. I froze. I recognized the voice. It belonged to Courtney, one of the mothers who had commented on Jessica's Instagram photos, calling her a saint. I turned slowly. Courtney was standing by the yogurts with Sarah Miller. They were looking at me with a mixture of fascination and revulsion, like spectators at a zoo looking at a dangerous animal behind glass. Hi, Sarah, I said. My voice was raspy. Sarah Miller, a woman who had once cried on my shoulder about her husband's gambling debts, tightened her grip on her shopping cart. She did not smile. She did not say hello. We do not want any trouble. Emily, Sarah said, her voice sharp and defensive. Please, just Sayuting 2# is greater than stay away from us. Stay away from the school. I did not do it. I whispered. She threw herself. Courtney let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. Oh, stop it. We all saw you. You were drunk. You were screaming. Just take some responsibility for once in your life. That poor girl could have lost her baby. That poor girl is a liar, I said, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. You are sick, Sarah, he said. She turned her cart around abruptly. Come on, Courtney, let us go to the other aisle. It smells like gin over here. They walked away, their heels clicking self-righteously on the floor. I stood alone in the cold air of the dairy section. I could feel the eyes of other shoppers on me. I felt the heat of their judgment burning my skin. I was a pariah. I was radioactive. I left the cart there, the almond milk sweating condensation onto the metal. I walked out of the store. I sat in my car and breathed in the stale air. It hurt. It hurt more than I expected. But as the sting of the humiliation faded, it was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Let them hate me, I thought. Let them believe I am the villain. It makes the disguise perfect. If they thought I was broken, if they thought I was a pathetic, drunken mess, they would never see the knife coming until it was buried in their backs. I drove back to my apartment. It was time to set the stage. I sat at my small kitchen table. I placed the phone in the center of the placemat. I poured a glass of water, took a sip to clear my throat, and then I acted. I slumped my shoulders. I let my face go slack. I summoned every ounce of grief, every ounce of exhaustion I had felt over the last 6 months. I needed to sound like a woman who had given up. I dialed Mark's number. He answered on the second ring. What do you want? Emily? You are violating the protective order just by calling me. I am sorry, I said. My voice trembled. It was not entirely fake. The adrenaline was making me shake. Please, Mark, do not hang up. I just... Hao Ling. 2# is greater than I cannot do this anymore. Cannot do what? Mark asked. His tone was wary, but I heard a hint of curiosity. I cannot fight you. I sobbed. I let a tear slide down my cheek, letting the emotion thick my voice. Everyone hates me. Sarah Miller just screamed at me in the grocery store. I am all alone. Mark, I am broke. I am tired. There was a silence on the line. I could picture him. He was probably standing in my kitchen, feeling superior, feeling powerful. You brought this on yourself, Mark said, but his voice had softened slightly. It was the pity of the victor. I know, I whispered. I know I did. That is why Hao Ling. 2# is greater than that is why I want to sign. I will give you the house. I will give you full custody. I just want it to stop. I want the noise in my head to stop. You are making the right decision, Mark said quickly. Too quickly. The desperation for the house sale leaked through his stern facade. It is better for everyone, especially the kids. I will sign everything, I continued, sniffing loudly. But Hao Ling, dear God, it is just such a waste. What is a waste? Mark asked. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The hook, the trust fund, I said softly. What trust fund? Mark asked. His voice sharpened. You did not know? I feigned surprise, followed by a defeated sigh. Oh, Mark, I never told you because Hao Ling, 2# is greater than well. Because we were having trouble. My grandfather, before he died, he set up a legacy trust, the Vanguard Family Trust. I never heard of this, Mark said. How much is in it? About $2 million. I lead. The number rolled off my tongue like honey. It was supposed to be for the children's education and future, but there was a clause, a residency clause. What kind of clause? Mark demanded. I could hear the greed dripping from his words. The trustee can only release the funds to the legal guardians if they are living in the family homestead. I explained, weaving the fabrication with intricate detail. My grandfather was obsessed with legacy. He wanted to ensure the house stayed in the family. The money is tied to the deed on Maplewood Drive. If I sell the house, Hao Ling, 2# is greater than if the house leaves the family. Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than the trust dissolves. The money goes to charity. Silence. Long, heavy silence. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end. Mark was doing the math. $2 million. That would pay off his debts. That would pay for the foreclosure. That would buy Jessica the lifestyle she was demanding. $2 million? Mark repeated, and it just... Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than disappears if we sell? Yes, I said, sounding choked up. That is why I fought so hard for the house. Mark, not for me, for Leo and Sophie. I wanted them to have that security. But Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than I messed it all up. Now I am going to lose the kids, and they are going to lose the money. I am such a failure. I heard a muffled sound in the background. A woman's voice. Jessica. She was listening. Wait a second. Mark said. The phone was muffled, as if he had covered the mouthpiece with his hand. I heard urgent, hushed whispering. I waited. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Mark came back on the line. Emily, hold on. Are you saying that if Saoyuting Haoling 2 hash is greater than if the family stays in the house, the money is accessible only to the legal guardians residing in the home? I said, if I sign the house over to you, Saoyuting Haoling 2 hash is greater than, and if you marry Jessica, Saoyuting Haoling 2 hash is greater than, then, technically, you two would be the guardians in the residence. You could petition the trustee. I let the implication hang there. I had just offered them the keys to a treasure chest that did not exist. But it does not matter, I added quickly, sounding defeated again. I am signing it over to you to sell. You need the money from the sale, right? To pay off your Saoyuting Haoling 2 hash is greater than things. No, wait, Mark said. Just Saoyuting Haoling 2 hash is greater than do not sign anything yet. We need to talk about this. I just want to get it over with. Mark, I cried, ramping up the drama. I want to say goodbye. I want to meet you at the house tomorrow. I want to sign the papers in the kitchen one last time. I want to apologize to Jessica. I need her to forgive me before I go away. Okay, Mark said. Okay, Emily, calm down. We will meet tomorrow at 6. At the house? Can Jessica be there? I asked. Please, I need to tell her I am sorry. I need to see that she is okay. She will be there. Mark promised. We will figure this out. Thank you. I whispered. Thank you, Mark. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my apartment, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. They had taken the bait. I knew Jessica. I knew her type. The moment she heard $2 million, the plan to sell the house vanished. Why sell the house for a few $100,000 in equity when she could marry Mark, keep the mansion, and gain control of a $2 million trust fund? She would force Mark to keep the house. She would force him to marry her immediately to secure the guardian status. And that was exactly where I wanted them. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I was not just going to win. I was going to humiliate them. I was going to expose them. And I was going to do it in the very room where they had tried to erase me. I picked up the envelope containing Ray's investigation, the proof of the fake pregnancy, the proof of the aliases, the proof of the sterilization. I picked up the hidden foreclosure notice I had stolen. I had the dynamite. I had the match. Tomorrow, at 6 o'clock on Maplewood Drive, I was going to light the fuse. The air in the kitchen was stagnant. It was the kind of heavy, pressurized silence that precedes a tornado. I sat at the granite island, my island, facing the two people who had spent the last 6 months dismantling my life. Mark sat to my left, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. He looked like a man trying to hold onto a cliff edge with greased fingers. Jessica sat across from me. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my current monthly rent. She had one hand resting protectively over her flat stomach, playing the role of the fragile, expectant mother to perfection. My lawyer, Brenda, sat at the end of the table, her face an unreadable mask of professional detachment. She opened her briefcase and laid the settlement papers on the cool stone surface. The sound of the paper sliding across the granite was deafening. "This is it," Mark said, his voice tight. "The transfer of deed, the custody agreement, the waiver of all marital assets." I looked at the papers. I picked up a pen. My hand trembled. It was a calculated tremor, a performance I had rehearsed in my mirror until it looked pathetic enough to feed their egos. Saoyudzing Haoling, 2# is greater than I started. Letting my voice crack, "I just want this to be over. I want you both to be happy." Jessica smiled. It was a beatific, gracious smile, the kind a winner bestows upon the vanquished. "We just want what is best for the children, Emily. We want to give them a stable home, a home with resources." "Resources," I repeated softly. "Yes, the trust fund." At the mention of the trust fund, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air grew sharper. Jessica sat up straighter. Mark stopped bouncing his leg. "About that," Mark said, clearing his throat, "we need to clarify the terms. You said the Vanguard Trust releases the funds only if the legal guardians reside in the home?" $2 million, I whispered, keeping my eyes on the table. My grandfather wanted to ensure the legacy, but the clause is strict. The guardians must be a married couple living on the property. If the house is sold, Saoyudzing Ling, 2# is greater than the trust dissolves. I looked up. I saw the greed flare in Jessica's eyes like a match striking phosphorus. She turned to Mark, her hand gripping his forearm. "Mark," she said, her voice urgent, "we cannot sell the house. If we sell, we lose the money for the baby. We lose everything. But the debt, Saoyudzing Haoling, 2# is greater than." Mark started to whisper, sweat beading on his forehead. "Screw the debt," Jessica hissed, forgetting her soft, maternal persona for a split second. "With $2 million, we can pay off whatever little bills you have. Mark, we need to secure this. We need to get married. Now, immediately." Mark looked at me, then at the papers, then at Jessica. He was trapped between his secret bankruptcy and her demand for a fortune that did not exist. "I suppose," Saoyudzing Ling, 2, Mark stammered. "I suppose we could go to the courthouse tomorrow." "No," Jessica insisted. "Tonight, we can call a justice of the peace. We sign the papers. We get married. And we claim the trust. We cannot risk Emily changing her mind." She looked at me with pure venom. "You will sign the waiver for the trust over to us, right? As part of the settlement?" "I will," I said meekly. "I just want Leo and Sophie to be taken care of." "Good," Jessica said, leaning back, triumphant. "Then it is settled. Mark and I are getting married. We are keeping the house, and we are taking the trust." I let out a long, shaky breath. I looked at the security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. A tiny red light was blinking. Mark had never bothered to change the passcodes. He was lazy. He assumed that because I was gone, my access was gone too. He was wrong. There is just one problem, I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was steady. It was cold. What problem? Jessica snapped. I reached into my oversized tote bag. I did not pull out a tissue to dry my eyes. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. The house, I said, sliding the foreclosure notice across the table toward Jessica. You cannot live in a house that the bank owns. Jessica frowned. She picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the red letters. Notice of default. Intent to foreclose. What is this? She asked, her voice rising. Mark has not paid the mortgage in 4 months, I said, leaning back in my chair, dropping the slump of my shoulders. He has $100,000 in debt to credit card companies. He took out a personal loan to buy you that car. This house, it is not an asset. It is a sinking ship. He was desperate to sell it today because if he does not, the sheriff is coming to put a padlock on the door next week. Jessica turned to Mark slowly. Her face was pale. Mark, is this true? You said you were a partner at the firm. You said you were liquid. Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than it is a temporary cash flow issue. Mark sputtered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Jessica, listen to me. Once we get the trust fund money, none of this matters. We can pay off the bank. We will be rich. About the trust fund, I interrupted. I allowed a small, dry smile to touch my lips. There is no trust fund. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. What? Mark whispered. My grandfather died broke. Mark, you know that. I made it up. I said simply. I needed to see if you were marrying her for love, or for the lifestyle you thought she could give you. And I needed to see if she was marrying you for the man you are, or the money she thought you had. I looked at Jessica. Her face was contorted with rage. The mask of the sweet, victimized stepmother had completely disintegrated. You bitch, Jessica screamed. You lying bitch. You wasted my time. I wasted your time? I laughed. I reached into the envelope again. Let us talk about wasted time. Or maybe, let us talk about biology. I slid the second document across the table. The medical report from the clinic in Miami. Laparoscopic bilateral salpingectomy. I read aloud. Removal of both fallopian tubes. Date of procedure, 3 years ago. Patient, Vanessa Rayburn, also known as Jessica. Mark looked at the paper. He looked at Jessica's stomach. He looked back at the paper. You, Saoyuting Haoling. 2, Mark stammered. But, Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than the baby. You said you were pregnant. You said you felt the baby kick. She cannot get pregnant. Mark, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. She has been sterile for 3 years. There is no baby. There never was a baby. She threw herself down those stairs to frame me because she needed a reason to force a quick settlement. She wanted the cash from the house sale before you found out she was a con artist. Mark stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. He looked at Jessica with a horror that was profound and absolute. You lied? About our child? You let me grieve for a child that did not exist? Jessica stood up too. She did not deny it. She did not cry. She looked at Mark with pure, unadulterated disgust. Oh, grow up. Mark, she spat. Look at you. You are a broke, middle-aged loser with a foreclosure notice. You think I wanted your baby? I wanted a payday. I thought you had money. God, you are pathetic. She grabbed her purse. I am leaving. Do not contact me. If you try to sue me, I will tell everyone about the illegal tax shelters you bragged about. You are not going anywhere, I said calmly. I pointed to the camera in the corner. That camera is live, I said. It is streaming directly to a cloud server, and the link to that stream was sent 10 minutes ago to your parole officer in Texas. Jessica, or should I call you Vanessa? I believe leaving the state was a violation of your probation for check fraud. Jessica froze. Her eyes darted to the camera. For the first time, I saw real fear. Not the fake fear she performed for Mark, but the primal fear of a trapped animal. And Mark, I said, turning to my ex-husband, I also sent the link to your creditors and to the partners at your firm. They are watching you conspire to commit marriage fraud to access a fake trust fund. I think your temporary cash flow issue is about to become a permanent unemployment issue. Mark sank back into his chair. He put his head in his hands. He made a sound like a wounded dog. Why? He whispered. Why did you do this, Emily? I stood up. I picked up my purse. I felt tall. I felt clean. Because you took my house. I said, because you took my children. Because you tried to convince the world I was crazy. I just wanted to show everyone the truth. I looked at Brenda. She closed her briefcase with a definitive click. The settlement offer is withdrawn. Brenda said to the room, we will be filing for full custody based on the evidence of fraud and injurement and unstable living conditions recorded in this session. We will see you in court. I walked to the door. I did not look back at Mark, sobbing into his hands. I did not look at Jessica, who was frantically typing on her phone, trying to find a way out of the net. I walked out of the kitchen, through the foyer where I had first seen the girl in the towel, and out into the cool evening air. The house was dark behind me. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene of a marriage. I got into my car. My hands were steady. I turned the key. I had won. The enemy was destroyed. The truth was out. But as I drove away, leaving the wreckage in my rearview mirror, I felt a cold, hollow space in my chest. Victory was supposed to taste sweet. Instead, it tasted like ash. I had burned the house down to kill the rats. But now, I was the one standing in the ashes. The police lights flashing against the siding of my house did not look like a rescue. They looked like a warning. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway, watching the finale of the opera I had orchestrated. It was a silent film from this distance. I saw the front door open. I saw Jessica, Vanessa, being escorted out by 2 officers. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. She was not screaming anymore. She was not playing the victim. She looked small, stripped of her pretenses, just a grifter whose luck had finally run dry. She scanned the darkness, perhaps looking for a camera, or perhaps looking for a way out. But there was nowhere left to go. Her past in Texas had caught up with her, and the warrant for check fraud was a leash she could not slip. Then came Mark. He was not in handcuffs, but he looked like a prisoner of war. He stood on the porch, watching the police car take his fiancée away. He held a piece of paper in his hand, likely the eviction notice from the bank or the subpoena from his partners. The wind caught his tie, whipping it around his neck. He looked at my car. Even through the darkness and the distance, I felt the weight of his gaze. It was not angry. It was hollow. He was a man who had gambled his family on a pair of 3s, and the house had finally won. I put the car in reverse and drove away. I did not need to speak to him. The silence was the loudest statement I could make. 3 weeks later, the gavel came down in family court. The proceedings were swift. The video evidence from the kitchen, combined with Ray's dossier on Jessica and the financial disclosures of Mark's bankruptcy, left the judge with very little room for interpretation. Mark did not even have a lawyer present. He could no longer afford one. He represented himself, mumbling about stress and manipulation. But the judge, a stern woman with no patience for theatrics, cut him off. I was granted full legal and physical custody. Mark was granted supervised visitation, 2 hours every other Saturday. At a state-approved center, he had lost his job. He had lost his reputation. He was currently living in a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people pay by the week and keep their curtains drawn. I won. That is what Brenda told me as we walked down the courthouse steps. You won. Emily, you got everything you wanted. I walked to my car, shielding my eyes from the sun. I tried to feel the surge of triumph. I tried to feel the vindication, but all I felt was tired. I drove to the school to pick up Leo and Sophie. It was the first time I was picking them up to bring them home. Really home. In months, when they walked out of the school building, they did not run to me. They did not cheer. Leo walked with his head down, dragging his backpack. Sophie was clutching a doll Jessica had bought her, a plastic princess with blonde hair. Hi, guys, I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. Ready to go home? Leo climbed into the back seat and buckled his seatbelt. He looked out the window. Is Jessica coming back? He asked. The question hit me in the chest like a physical blow. No, Leo, I said gently. Jessica had to go away. She, 小于今和零. 2 hashes greater than she was, not who she said she was. She was nice to me, Leo said softly. She let me play video games. She did not yell. I gripped the steering wheel. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that she was a predator, that her kindness was a currency she used to buy his trust so she could rob his father. But I could not. He was 8 years old. All he knew was that the fun lady who gave him sugar was gone, and the strict mother who destroyed his birthday cake was back. I know, buddy, I said. I know it is hard. We drove to Maplewood Drive. I had negotiated with the bank, using the last of my savings and a loan from my aunt. I had managed to pay the arrears on the mortgage to stop the foreclosure. The house was mine again. We pulled into the driveway. The hole for the koi pond was still there, a muddy scar in the front lawn filled with stagnant rainwater. The rose bushes were gone. The exterior looked neglected, a mirror of the trauma that had occurred within its walls. We walked inside. The house echoed. Mark had sold most of the furniture in a panic before the end, trying to liquidate assets. The living room was empty. The walls were still that stark. Clinical white Jessica had insisted on. The smell of her sage smudging still lingered faintly, masking the scent of the home I used to know. It is empty, Sophie whispered, looking around the cavernous foyer. We will fill it up, I said. We will paint the walls. We will get new furniture. We will make it ours again. Sophie looked at me, her big eyes filled with a terrifying wisdom. But Daddy is not here. No, I said. Daddy lives somewhere else now, because you made him leave. Leo said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. I looked at my son. I saw the resentment simmering in his eyes. Jessica had done her job well. She had planted the seeds of discord deep in the soil of his mind, and even though the gardener was gone, the weeds were still growing. I did what I had to do to protect us. I said, my voice steady. Leo just turned and walked up the stairs to his room. A moment later, I heard the door slam. I stood in the foyer. I looked at the spot where Jessica had stood in the towel that first morning. I looked at the kitchen island where I had laid out the trap. I had fought a war for this house. I had destroyed a woman, ruined a man, and nearly lost my own sanity to reclaim this territory. I held the deed in my hand. I held the keys in my pocket, but as I stood there, in the fading light, listening to my daughter whimper for a plastic doll given to her by a con artist, and my son barring his door against me, I realized the bitter truth. You can win the war, but you cannot unburn the village. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water from the tap. I sat on the floor because there were no chairs. I drank the water. It tasted like metal. I was the queen of the castle. I was the victor. I was the survivor. But as the sun went down and the shadows stretched across the empty floorboards, the house felt larger than it ever had before. It felt cold, and for the first time, I wondered if the ghosts Jessica talked about were real, because as I sat there in the silence, I realized I was not alone. I was living with the ghosts of the family we used to be, and no amount of fresh paint or new furniture would ever truly exorcise them. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the chill settle into my bones. I won. I whispered to the empty room. The house did not answer. It just held the silence, vast and indifferent, swallowing my victory whole until there was nothing left but the echo.